Welcome to Frequency. I'm Jenny Field.
And I'm Chuck Ghost. Frequency is your go-to for real talk about comms, culture, and employee experience beyond the buzzwords and straight to what matters. And Jenny, I'm going to be a bit selfish to kick things off this week. I want to talk about the Ecology Mentorship Program. This is something that I would have never guessed in a million years we would have run as part of Ecology, but it was brought to us by a friend of ours, Elizabeth Wang, who ran a mentorship program at her past company or current company and wanted to bring that to Ecology. And there really wasn't a strong structured mentorship program for communicators, at least here in the US. It has been an absolute crown jewel of our program to see the level of attention, detail, and personalization that comes in this mentorship program and the needs that these mentees have that we're able to find mentors to match them up with. I did a bit of a brag LinkedIn post about my mentee from a couple years back, Ashley Hickson. And it was so ironic that the day I talked about this, of her wanting to find her voice and presented at conferences and all these things, that same day she was presenting as part of her master's degree. So it was like this, it just shows you get the right match, and the people who come to us and say, hey, I think I need some help here. I want to grow here. We're able to match that up. And so anybody who wants to grow, joinecology.com/mentorship. You can learn all about it. The deadline is December 15th. So I just wanted to get that out there to everyone because it is really good. We were talking a bit before we started recording, Jenny, about the holidays, and I have a very important, perhaps even divisive question in our relationship, Jenny, which is Die Hard a Christmas movie?
Well, I watch it every Christmas Eve, so...
Answer the question, Jenny. Is Die Hard a Christmas movie?
Yes.
No, the answer is no. Sorry, you got that one wrong.
But I think it depends on how you define a Christmas movie.
We're not getting into the definitions. I just wanted to know if you thought, I know it's not a Christmas movie because Bruce Willis said it is not a Christmas movie on record. There's video of it. So anyway, I'm gonna go with the man behind John McClane on this one to say that Die Hard is not a Christmas movie. But I was also thinking with this Christmas time, seeing on LinkedIn the number of layoffs that are happening right now. When you think, I know that November and December in the grand scheme of calendars aren't any different than any other months of the year, but it feels particularly more brutal when companies are laying people off in November and December. And I know I'm surprised by this, but it seems like there's been a big uptick in the last couple of weeks.
That is so interesting. I'm with you on it's really horrible when it's done around Christmas time. But my LinkedIn feels like it's full of jobs in the US.
Oh, there you go. I mean, that's a good thing for us.
We're obviously having different... I feel like all the time I'm looking at the jobs that are coming through, and nearly, I would say, more than half the ones that are coming up on my feed are in the US in internal comms, employee experience. There's loads. I feel like there's loads. And there's probably not loads, but it feels like that on my LinkedIn for sure.
Yeah, and I don't know in particular that it's impacting comms over other areas. They seem to be kind of blanket layoffs out there. So hopefully those people that are out there job searching, you get a bit of a holiday miracle and are able to land one of those jobs that are out there. I just hate to see it because that's already a pressure time for a lot of people. Yeah. And you add that layer in of losing your job is
it's horrible.
Especially painful. But on that note, Jenny, what do you have teed up for us this week?
So we're a little bit report heavy this week, which is not
well, that's on you.
Intentional.
You
I know it's on me. I know. But it's because they're good reports. So I'm going to kick us off in a minute on a report from the UK government's communication service, and I'll explain more about them in a second. That's about misinformation. We've then got a report from Reward Gateway, who have looked at wellbeing in the UK, and they've done some research, and there's a report on that. I went to a Gallup event not that long ago called Do Brits Really Hate Working? So we're going to dive into some stats and data around employee engagement. And then there's also a report from Fauna Fauna and CultureCon, who have done some research into sort of the human side of work, talking about the future of work has a heartbeat. So there is a bit report heavy, but as I keep saying to people, there is so much content out there. And part of the reason I love doing this is that we get to read these reports and then share the highlights and big takeaways for people that don't have that time in their day job. So I'm going to kick us off with the UK government framework for communicators to tackle misinformation. Now, in the UK, we have what's called the Government Communication Service. I don't know if you have an equivalent over there, but it's everybody that works in a communication role across all the different parts of government. I've done work with them for a number of years as guest speakers or facilitators at different events, but their frameworks and the content that they share for communicators is always really, really good, and it's often referred to. But this one about misinformation I thought was particularly relevant for all communicators. So it's called the Resist 3 framework, and it provides a structured approach for people to build resilience against information threats, including misinformation, disinformation, and foreign interference. Now, as I said, this is aimed at government communication teams, but really this can be applied to any communication function anywhere. Now, the RESIST is an acronym. It's been developed by Dr. James Pament, and it offers 6 practical steps. 1 is recognise, identify and assess information threats. 2, early warning, monitor risks to protect priorities and audiences. 3 is the S, so situational insight, transform data into actionable insights for timely responses. 4 is impact analysis, prioritise and escalate threats by assessing their impact. 5 is strategic communications, implement effective communication strategies. And 6 is tracking effectiveness, so evaluating that for improvement. So the framework is 6 steps. It's very flexible. It's the latest version of this sort of framework. But there were 2 things that I thought were worth taking away for comms professionals as I was looking at it. The first is that you don't respond to everything. Strategic silence is valid. Not all misinformation requires a response. And I think that's really important. It suggests that we should use prioritization matrices to help. And I think that strategic silence is valid, I thought was lovely. And then the second is build resilience proactively, not just reactively. So the most effective approach combines this long-term resilience building and then reactive responses. So making sure that you've got those trusted partnerships, you've got transparent communication, you're doing all the work in that long-term resilience building to then couple that with some reactive responses. So my question here is, while this report focuses more maybe on external comms, there is a huge challenge of misinformation internally in organisations. And do you think these frameworks can be applied for internal comms folks?
Yeah, what I think is interesting about this approach is it's not so much how to stop these threats of misinformation, difference. It's actually building that resiliency against them. It's almost acknowledging like, hey, this is going to happen, period. So we're never going to stop it. So how do we build that resistance to it? That's a completely shift on the point of view. I think that even I've viewed, whether it's, foreign interference, which is obviously very important, or even just misinformation or disinformation inside a company, I've always viewed it as like, how do you stop that? Not how do you build the resistance to it? So it's really shifted the point of view. It's also shifted to some personal ownership of it, because this is going to come down to you building that resistance. So I think absolutely, I'm a sucker for a good framework, especially if it spells out a word like that. That is part of what you need to do, which is resist. So I think absolutely, I think this is a good chance to also show the risks that are out there of misinformation and disinformation. And depending on the companies you work for, there is foreign interference. Literally any company of any size is being attacked by hackers at all times, trying to people to get in there, whether from domestic or abroad. So I do think these frameworks are good because it lets people know that there is some personal accountability to it, but also steps to build that resistance to it, because disinformation, misinformation is often quite sexy. It's often quite lurid. And so it's easy to get sucked into that because it's pretty out there and wild and crazy at times, but not too crazy, like just crazy enough that you believe it. So I think this actually gives people some steps.
Yeah. And I think even though the words Like the first one about recognize, identifying and assessing information threats. That language can feel quite strong in an internal comms environment, because really you're thinking about who are the people that are a bit of a threat to that sort of truth and honesty and transparent communication. But I do think it's important to talk about that, because there will be pockets in organizations of people that are trying to sabotage or do things. And I think identifying those areas, or those individuals, I think is actually quite important to think about how you might manage that. To your point, you can't stop it. So actually, how do you then manage that internally?
I actually love that they use the word threat. I would actually bring that word into that company communication, because it gets people's attention, and it's not for drama reasons. It's true. It's using the right word. It's saying exactly what it is. You're not trying to sugarcoat it, soften the stance. It is what it is.
Right, let's move on to some well-being chat. So this was a report from Reward Gateway. It's a UK workplace wellbeing research piece. It was done with Reward Gateway and Edenred. They surveyed 4,000 employees and 500 HR managers. And it basically reveals that employee wellbeing has become a business imperative. As I was reading this, I did start to have questions about what do we mean by well-being at work? Mm-hmm. And I still have that question, but some of the data that's shared. So 84% of employees would consider staying at a job longer if they had more mental and physical well-being offering. 26% of employees believe their employer is responsible for their well-being. Now, in the report, this is just a stat, but as you read the detail, it does say, in brackets, like after themselves. And I was like, you've kind of omitted that in the big graphic of it. Because I was reading it thinking, hang on a minute, a quarter of people think that their employer is responsible. So I'm glad they've clarified that. It also did break down a bit about what well-being is. So it was like, how are people prioritising well-being in terms of what they're doing? And the top 5, 67% make time for themselves, 55% exercise regularly, 54% ensure they get enough sleep, 46% manage their diet, and 35% make sure they take all their annual leave. Interesting. The report goes on to talk about the fact that it's the end of the era of salary. So we're now at a point where nearly half, 48% of employees now state that there is nothing more important than work-life balance, which surpasses the 45% who prioritise pay. That is a shift that I think is worth noting. The really consistent theme is this connection between employer support and employee loyalty, which actually we've talked a little bit about before in the Gallup book that we've talked about called Culture Shock, where that talked about after the pandemic, we basically saw this sort of shift. So when the pandemic started, the percentage of employees who felt their organisation cared about them nearly doubled. It reached a high of 49% in May. Before the pandemic, it was only about 21%. So there was a real shift. Since the pandemic, that number has plummeted. And in 2024, it was about 21% again. So we sort of had this real supportive bubble during the pandemic, and then it's gone back down to where it was before. There's so much I could talk about this, but my big thing is this interchangeable use of work-life balance and well-being, because I'm not sure we should use them interchangeably. I think we should be clear what they are. But how do organisations get this right? Because this is massive, like managing your diet, getting enough sleep. Like, these are big human things that are not really anything to do with work. And I think that's the challenge.
That's what I felt like in reading. I would love to know what all, I have to go back and look at the full report to see like, what were all the tick boxes that people could do, because yeah, I don't think it's your company's responsibility to make sure that you exercise regularly or checking in with you to get enough sleep or manage your diet or portion.
Yeah.
I mean,
have you eaten enough fruit today?
That's like, I see the kind of your personal reflection on well-being versus the company's responsibility to it. In doing some research on this, Jenny, I have a new buzzword to share with all of you. That apparently people are growing a bit weary of this term well-being or workplace well-being. There's now a new term out there, Jenny. Human sustainability.
Oh, God. Get in the bin.
So But in finding some of this data, so I found some US
What
research.
does that even mean?
Again, it's not, let's just hope it doesn't catch on. In this research said surveys of workers in the US found that around 3/4 report moderate or high concern about their workplace well-being, even as employers are expanding offerings, indicating that initiatives may not be enough when you're looking at like workload and culture and other job design and all that kind of stuff. Adding these perks and all that aren't really impacting the well-being and this concern. And part of this issue is what leaders say versus what employees experience. There is a massive gap that is now happening in well-being where the leaders are saying, well-being is important, pass it on. That's not what the employees are experiencing. There's that middle layer that we've talked about as being eradicated in some organizations. That's proving to be a challenge because leaders are assuming because they say everyone is doing, and that's not the case, at least with well-being. Also, this points to if they really cared about well-being, we would not have return to office mandates and some of those other things that are going on, which obviously does impact the well-being of your employees.
I think the one thing I would encourage people to look at is this, making sure I take all of my annual leave, because actually that is really important. I've had this reflection this year for me where I've had sort of various bouts of tonsillitis, which is quite unusual for me. So I'm always like, okay, what's going on? And then I looked back over my year to see how many days off I'd had. And I've had 18 days off this year, which is low, right? Even though I might have flexible Fridays and things like that, actual proper time off break, I haven't had enough of that. So I've proactively changed that for next year and blocked all my time off to kind of get myself back up to sort of 30 days. But I do think that is something that we can be quite bad at doing individually. I think we can fall into that trap of doing it. And I think, as you know, we both run businesses and it's very easy to not take time off and just
That's
kind of
what I was
going
to ask. Like, how much annual leave do you gift yourself?
Well, so we have a fully flexible working and unlimited leave, but I'm very indoctrinated to work. So I work on about 28 to 30 days of like proper leave. So I've got like a 2-week holiday next year. I've got a week where I'm just off at home, and then I've probably got another week planned. So I've tried to block those times out. And even that is, that's 28 days. And then a break over Christmas and stuff.
Yeah,
so
I think the annual leave conversation gets very tricky when organizations are pitching unlimited PTO.
It doesn't work.
As part of it, it works well for the company. It does not work well for the employee because you don't then earn anything. There's nothing for you to take with you. And inevitably, I've had this experience where like, oh, it's unlimited. I don't need to take that off. I can just take it off again a little bit later. So I do think that's one situation that sort of made that a bit more problematic, is people taking the breaks and also feeling like when they are taking that break, they are taking a break. I mean, I think that is a challenge. When you mentioned 18 days, there's probably a lot of Americans that are listening like, oh, 3.5 weeks, Jenni, that's amazing. Great. That's a lot of time off. Well done. But that shows some of the cultural differences that are out there when it comes to holidays and paid leave.
Yeah, I would encourage everyone to go for 28. It's much better.
Well, not everyone has that choice, Ms. Field.
No, if you can, then definitely go for that. What are you going to go for next year?
I don't even know. That's why I was asking you, like, what do you gift yourself? Because I feel like, now, one thing we have talked about in our house is sort of that need on a quarterly basis to have some kind of stretched period of time where you're kind of unplugging. You're not doing this like avoiding work, but you're just taking a bit of a break. We've recognized that we sort of need that in our brain. So we're trying to build that both on trips together, but also stuff we might do separate from one another.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I think every quarter is a nice way to do it. As someone who's run a business for 8 years, I know how easy it is, as I'm demonstrating, to get sucked into not doing that. So yeah, love that. And on this note of British people having so much holiday, the Gallup event that I went to was called Do Brits Really Hate Working? Nothing like a great clickbait headline, is there, to get you talking about it. But this was an event run with Gallup and the Institute of Directors, which I'm a member of, which is how I got to go. And we were presented with all sorts of data from Gallup and some insights into their strengths work. But the question of do Brits really hate working is not a particularly straightforward answer. But what was staggering was that they shared that 90% of employees in the UK are disengaged or not actively engaged. Now, that does sound awful when you say that, but it raises bigger questions that we've talked about on this podcast for a number of episodes around, is engagement really the right measure of organisational success? Because I'm not convinced it is, and the numbers don't seem to be showing us anything remotely like the fact we're focusing on them to improve them. The bit I wanted to share here was the definition of employee engagement from Gallup, because we've also talked in the past here about some work that I did about valuing communication, and you pulled out of that report that distinction of employee engagement between work engagement and organisational engagement. Well, Gallup just smoosh it all together. So their definition is employees who are highly involved in and enthusiastic about their work and workplace. They are psychological owners, drive performance and innovation, and move the organisation forward. Employee engagement measures the involvement and enthusiasm of employees in their work and workplace. Employees can become engaged when their basic needs are met and when they have a chance to contribute, a sense of belonging, and opportunities to learn and grow. I mean, it sounds marvellous, doesn't it? So that's their definition. What else did we hear? They said that Europe is the lowest globally in terms of engagement. Female managers under 35 have seen the biggest drops in engagement. 50% of global employees are actively seeking another role, or they're keeping an eye on the market. It was 30% for the UK, so it's a bit higher from a global perspective. There was a general sense that people are stuck. The whole work-life balance came up, or flexibility, and that being what drives people to look for another role. That tracks with the research we've just talked about. Engaged employees are 71% less likely to feel burned out at work, very often or always. Engaged employees are 67% more likely to be thriving in life based on their life evaluation. Wellbeing seems to be the biggest driver of engagement. So on the chart they showed, they had it sort of stretched out the most in terms of that impact it can have. They did go on to explain why engagement, which was obviously my question. And their answer about why we should focus on engagement was an engagement-focused strategy builds a culture of high development and produces sustainable high performance even amid disruption. Employees have fundamental psychological needs that must be met to achieve and sustain high performance. This is as true for independent, remote workers as it is for those who work collaboratively in the office. It was quite an event. So I left feeling really quite reflective. I left with a lot of questions about what leaders are really trying to understand by measuring engagement. I left with questions about this whole work and workplace engagement and the psychological needs and whether they're being met. I left with a lot. So my question is, what do we really want to know when it comes to organisational effectiveness? What are we really trying to achieve?
Yeah, when I go back and look at Gallup's definition of an employee engagement, it perfectly explains why people in the UK are disengaged or not actively engaged, kind of whatever that means. Because you look at, I'm going back to the last sentence here, employees can become engaged when their basic needs are met and when they have a chance to contribute, a sense of belonging, and opportunities to learn and grow. There's no ors in there.
No.
It's not or a chance to contribute or a sense of belonging or opportunities to learn. Like, all of those things need to be in play in theory for someone to be engaged. So someone could feel like their basic needs are met. That's not good enough for them to be engaged. Or a sense they feel like they belong on the team, but they don't really have a chance to learn and grow. Well, then they're not going to be engaged. So you've set up, and I don't think necessarily those numbers should be any different. Like we have this expectation that because employees get a paycheck, they are going to be engaged in what the company wants them to be engaged in. We know that's a fallacy. We know that's not true. So I think that definition alone describes exactly why these people are not actively engaged, because companies aren't delivering on all those things. And to your point about what do we really want to know when they're measuring it? This is leaders wanting to know, do people like us? Are we doing the right things? Because we see that when they don't get the good data, that data doesn't seem to show up in the reports later on. It was like, or it's excused away. Oh, that's because so-and-so did this or this team. Oh, okay, we don't need to worry about that data. I think there's a bit of confirmation bias here where leaders want to know the things that they are doing are having the impact that they want to have. That's truly what I think is driving that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure there's much employee listening happening to it. On the back end, there might be, but that's not the driver for why, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, and I've got so many thoughts on this. I've been scribbling and trying to make my thoughts make sense, which I think I started trying to do after reading Culture Shock, and it's continued. But I do think there is an issue with this definition, to your point, of you can't possibly achieve that for everybody, because it's so linked to managers, and the investment in managers isn't there enough to do this, because as we've talked about loads on this, that manager layer is being stripped out everywhere. So how on earth are we going to actually move this and create an engaged organization?
Do managers feel like they have a chance to contribute? Do they have a sense of belonging? Do they have opportunities to learn and grow? Because if they don't, that is not going to trickle down to their team.
Yeah. And it's everybody. And I think that's the thing that struck me in the room was the people in the room were all directors of companies. And there was a definite sense in the questioning of, can you just give me a framework to fix this in my organization I can put in place that will just do this for everybody? And I was talking about this earlier today on a podcast interview I was giving, and I was saying you can't sort of short circuit this. You have to do the work. This is consistent, ongoing work. It's not a case of give me a framework that means I can just push this out across my team and I can fix engagement. That's never going to work, because we're too complex and messy and individual. And I feel like people still want that quick fix to address this, when actually there's quite a lot in that definition in terms of the work that's needed to create it.
I was going to ask you what the vibe in the room was. Like what were sort of the questions that these directors were asking, or what were their expectations and experiences?
So there was that around kind of the frameworks. There were a few people sharing that kind of, the need for kind of coaching and doing those things. There was one sort of, there was somebody who just liked the sound of their own voice. It wasn't me. And there was someone who actually made a really good point. And he said, this is basically on us. Like we used to do all this stuff and then we stopped doing it. And we need to go back to doing all this stuff that we've stopped doing maybe in the last 10 years. And I thought that was quite reflective of how leadership has changed and shifted, and how years ago, actually, there was more around development. There were leadership development programs. There was that investment, and all of that does seem to be being pulled out as people are trying to take out costs and all those things. So I thought that was quite reflective.
Well, just go back and look at the data point from Reward Gateway, where people, like pre-pandemic, how they felt about their companies, or the companies taking care of their well-being. It went up during the pandemic and now has dropped back down.
Yes, so well, that was Gallup. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Gallup. So if employees don't feel like the companies care about them, why should they care about the company? Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't think it's an age-old problem. I remember writing a blog years ago when I used to have a blog thing called Confessions of an Internal Communicator. And my blog was called Why Should I Care About You When You Don't Care About Me? I was clearly having a very bad day as a head of internal comms. But it's it's true. And I think that's just so valid for people as leaders and managers. Like that's... So the last report I wanted to talk about was the report from Fauna and CultureCon. So it's the Work Possible report, where they heard from 11 countries, over 6,000 people, and they gathered about 4,000 stories. Now, some data from the research, it shows that while 89% say their workplace feels human, deeper analysis shows only 49% receive active support. 38% just feel acknowledged. So what they were looking at in this report was how to make work more human. They have picked out the 3 most human industries: technology, then media and creative, and then professional services. That surprised me. I'm not gonna lie. I was like, oh, that's interesting. When support is bad, 57% want to leave. When support is good, only 2% do. 57% not surprising, but that gap I think is quite big in terms of the good and the bad. But they offer a model in the report for the human employee experience. So they wanted to create a framework to address the buzz phrase of the future of work is human. And so they've created this sort of wheel, if you like, and it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 elements to it. So the first is leaders in your corner, leading people, not resources. The second is safe to struggle and grow, the humanity of mistakes. The third is valued beyond impact, recognition of our whole contribution. Then we've got real help, real time, so action when life gets real. Then we've got seen and known, so belonging in our differences. And then the final one is life-centered flexibility, making our lives work. So what do you think about the model? Do you think it's something that leaders could pick up and run with, and we can finally move forward with the future of work is human into something that could be reality?
When you said the future of work is human, I thought of human sustainability. And while I am a big fan of frameworks, I'm not the biggest fan of wheels. So I gotta pull that out there.
I'll take that.
I'm just not a big wheel fan.
So I'm
not a big wheel fan.
I feel that.
But let's go back to that engagement stuff. If you feel like leaders are in your corner and you can struggle, grow, make mistakes. You've got valued beyond your impact. You've got real help, real time. You feel seen and known. There's that sense of belonging coming in. You've got this life-centered flexibility, like you're in charge. That's when you get engaged employees. That's when you get people that are dedicated to it because they then feel supported. Right now, companies are expecting employees to do that without the support. This to me screams of exactly what leadership teams, God forbid, HR teams actually try to focus on. Because if employees don't feel like they have these things, they either are, disengaged or actively not engaged, whatever those two words were, or looking to leave, looking for other jobs, looking around, not giving 100%, not saying everybody should give 100% every day too. I think that's what companies should be focused on. If you deliver that, as if you're a leader in your company and you're focused on delivering these 6 things, whether it's part of a wheel or a chart or a framework or a bar or whatever, you've nailed it. You've absolutely nailed it.
Yeah. My favorite one on this was the real help, real time action when life gets real, because I think that for me is almost that crux of that, not the flexibility, but it's all of those things. It's that smooshing of your outside work, inside work. And there are it all combines and collapses because we are just only one person. And I think I've heard some horror stories of how people have been treated when horrendous things have happened to them in their private lives, and how work have been like, well, the policy is 5 days, so it's 5 days. And I just can't comprehend that at all. It's just awful. So I think if I could pick one, and I'm going to ask you to pick one, if you could pick one, I would pick the real help, real time, and that action when life gets real.
If I could pick one that has mattered most to me in my career, it is absolutely that leaders in your corner. Because I don't think leaders oftentimes realize what that does for an employee. If they know you've got their back, it's like the reverse of the org chart at that point. It's like, this is your space. You've got us for support.
Yeah.
I think that screams like belief and trust and all of those things. That's always mattered to me, sometimes to a fault. I will agree.
Yeah.
That's why I'm very highly critical of leaders, because I expect a lot out of leaders. And I don't think they often understand what that means when the employee feels like they've got the support in place.
So that wraps us up for our articles today. What are you freaking out about?
My freak out is this, Jenny. This is a positive one. Trying to get emotional about this. But tomorrow, when we're recording this, the next day, my wife, Kristen, and I are flying to Hawaii to celebrate my 50th birthday. Neither of us, I have never been to Hawaii. She apparently went as a kid, so I don't think that really counts as much. So we're going, the two of us. In sharing this with my mom, that we were going, this is like months ago, she shared a story with me about how my dad and her had always wanted to go. And in fact, they had plans to go around a significant kind of joint wedding anniversaries between my parents and my aunt and uncle, older aunt and uncle of them. Kind of anniversaries at the same time. They were going to go to Hawaii together. Unfortunately, my father passed away before they could do that. So he died at age 46. Once I went past my dad's age, I've kind of felt like I've been living for both of us. We share the same name, the same temperament, same sense of humor, all of those things. I still have his name badge at my desk every day. And the fact that we're doing this trip just feels like that's a continuation of that, that I am kind of living this life for the both of us, one that he did not get a chance to do, that I now get to carry that torch forward. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to this trip. Not just because it's Hawaii, but because it's a continuation of that story.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that. And I think it will make it so much more meaningful. Like it's meaningful because it's your birthday and it's an incredible place to go. I've equally not been, but to go and have that with you, like have him with you really while you're there, it's just going to be lovely. So I hope you get to find some time to chat to him as you walk along the beach or something like that. And I think that would be nice. So my freak out is also positive this week, and it is the Wrapped feature that is everywhere of your Spotify Wrapped, your YouTube Wrapped, your Apple Wrapped, where it shows you what you've listened to and how many hours you've spent. And we had a delightful tag for someone who shared that their YouTube Wrapped featured our podcast, which I thought was incredible. I've had several friends message me today because I put it on my Instagram going, this is like levels of achievement to be on someone's Wrap. So I just wanted to say, to celebrate it really with you, because I think otherwise we're not going to talk about it. And I think that's important. And I just think it's cool. And thank you to Shona for sharing with us that she's been listening to us on YouTube and also on Spotify, she did say. But I just think it's worth celebrating. I think it's really cool that we're on somebody's Wrapped.
Yeah, I will say I was pretty blown away when I saw her do the post and tagged us in it. One, to show up anywhere in somebody's top listing, let alone like the top spot of it is like I take that on as a point of pride. Like I'll carry that forward with us because I know that we put a lot of work into this. We don't do it to get attention. We both love attention. We're not going to deny that. But the fact that there's an audience out there that hasn't just listened, but is listening and is on this journey with us. So thank you, Shona, for tagging us, sharing that with us. It really does mean a lot.
It really does. It really does. Well, that's it for this week. Thank you for joining us. All of the articles that have inspired this conversation are in the show notes. We'll also pop a link to the mentoring scheme that Chuck mentioned with Ecology at the start of the session. And please don't forget to rate and review after you've listened. Subscribe so that you don't miss another episode. And why not pass this along to someone that you think would enjoy listening or watching, because we are on YouTube. Thank you to Poet Ali for contributing the music to the show, and we're back every Monday with news, insights and opinions about everything comms and leadership in workplaces today. Keep tuning in and turning up.